Welcome to Mystara for a replacement video, as this week the scheduled topic turned out to be not viable, so I just went to the next one in line. The Lost City of Koralgesh. This is a deep dive video. I mean real deep, going back to Dungeon Magazine number 2 from November 1986. This is the first Mystara-specific adventure from the magazine, and a surprisingly detailed one, complete with 2 deadly monsters that have never been seen again, at least as far as I could tell. So pack up and get ready to trek to the Lost City of the Sun. I'm Mr. Welch, and today we're going to meet the Tyrannobus and the Epidrazzle. First, the original video was the games of Mystara. You know, the card games, dice games, kids games, the similar that you would find in the setting. This started out great with Spottle, a dice game played with frogs and tasty dice, and Dizzy Bop, a gnomish game combining the best parts of merry-go-rounds and pugil sticks. But then the sources dried up. The few games that had names didn't have detailed descriptions. The dwarven game of Gem Die used carved gemstones in the shape of dice where you were competing for your opponent's dice, but had a grand total of 16 words describing it. There was bowling and pinball from the Inventions book, but I'm sure those were a joke. So I had 12 games, 2 of which were humorous, 2 had some background, and the rest were throwaway lines. I couldn't make a video out of that. So instead, I'm introducing you to a part of Mystara I would bet hardly any of you are familiar with. Koralgesh is a very early adventure, but does reference quite a few places in Mystara to confirm its setting. And it does mention Immortals and other such to double down on that. It's in the Savage Coast region, formerly located on a seaside cliff where the Gash Mountains ended. I couldn't find the Gash Mountains anywhere on the map, not even in the module X9, the Savage Coast. But it is on the Western Sea, and was built on what is now known as a volcano. It's not on any map, being a lost city and all. But one such location on the Savage Coast meets all the criteria. Due west of the free city of Dunvale, Mount Ah is a volcano on the coast with a small mountain chain that could easily be the Gash Mountains. The nearby village of Vineyard is too small to merit being placed on the map. Okay, we found Koralgesh. Mount Ah is supposed to be surrounded by desert climate, but with the volcanic soil and the rain coming in from the ocean, you could see why there's a wine growing industry here. Koralgesh was a technologically advanced civilization that occupied an easily defended natural harbor. The city was prosperous, its merchant fleet was stated to be numerous, and the keep the city built to guard the port was considered unassailable. Various pirate fleets tested this claim multiple times, with the city proving victorious after every attack. At the top of the cliff, the town built a temple to their patron Immortal Kor, who brought the sun's light to warm his people. Kor obviously is another aspect of Ixion. There's no real conversion there. But the city had enemies. The most significant threat was the pirates who lusted after the wealth of Koralgesh. Finally, the pirates turned to a rival immortal in Tram, a chaotic immortal who opposed Kor. Thanatos is the most likely suspect, but it's not important to the story. The pirates returned in great numbers, this time with the assistance of magic, and began overrunning the city. The king rode forth with his not insignificant army, and fought the pirates head-on as they made landfall. The pirates' new magical aid allowed them to slowly push the king's forces back, with the brutal fighting destroying the city one block at a time. The problem was the pirates' numbers were too great, and the magics they called down destroyed Koralgesh's fortifications as the pirates advanced. Eventually, the Koralgesh tactics changed from a counterattack to a holding action, and the population fled north to escape the city. Finally, the last defenders of the town retreated to the temple and called on the immortal Kor not for help, as the city was lost, but for vengeance. Kor answered when the side of the mountain exploded with a pyroclastic fury. The volcano destroyed the city along with the pirates. Koralgesh was no more. There are more than a few problems with this history. First off, per canon, this happened 62 years ago, yet the city has become forgotten. So no elves or dwarves were living in the city. An 80-year-old human would have been about 18 when this happened, and the destruction of your home to an invasion is something you wouldn't forget. Granted, this was a dungeon magazine written a year before Karamikos came out, but a year after the Savage Coast hit the shelves. However, that module was retconned out of existence anyways. From the information presented in the magazine, apart from Koralgesh's merchant fleet, their other primary industry was fishing. This makes sense for a nautical power. The museum the players will find showcases the nation's seagoing industries, revealing their fishing fleet was quite large. The city crafted coral into various items for sale or decoration. This probably gave the town its name, combining coral with the mountains of Gash. The city also made a healthy trade with its metal weapons and tools, as the many iron weapons and armor in its forges can attest to. Dwarves built the city from white granite from the appropriately named White Mountains. Dwarven engineers were contracted for the task, and their expertise created buildings of such durability that they remained largely intact even after the volcanic eruption. The city was designed by master architects who selected Koralgesh Harbor for its easy defense, large bay, and easy access to the ocean. The city would still be standing if the pirates hadn't acquired the entropic magic they used to invade. unless the story about Kor causing the volcano to erupt was a fabrication, and instead it was just that the volcano Helm's Peak erupted normally. The city before its destruction was built on a set of tiers, starting with the docks and the warehouses at sea level, and the people built each neighborhood up on a different level. Eventually the tiers reached from the docks all the way to the Temple of Kor on the cliffs above. These city tiers were washed into the ocean when the volcano erupted. Most were already laid waste in the fighting between the pirates and the city's army. The city was devoted to trading. At its height, it was called the Golden Gem of Kor by its neighbors. The frequently traded items included precious metals, silks, spices, and art objects. There's an excellent chance that collectors can find many examples of Koralgesh art in other nations that might give a better example of life in the city at its height. The king was known as Immortal. He was a great leader by the one account we have of him. He had an unnamed queen and daughter, and there is a chance they survived the city's fall. But Immortal's fate is known. He led the counterattack against the pirates and inflicted heavy losses on them, but eventually was cut down by arrows in the battle. Under his rule, the city prospered, its reach and wealth increased exponentially, he was beloved by his people, and he seemed to be clever and wise. He had an unusual form of punishment in the form of an illusionary gold dragon that would manifest to breathe fire on people who offended him in court. Of course, this wasn't fatal, but the victim would be teleported to the dungeon, but to everyone watching, the dragon incinerated the target completely. The fall of Koralgesh was due to deception and treachery rather than just brute force. Brute force had a lot to do with it, but only once the pirate fleet could enter the city. The wizard Landro immigrated to Koralgesh and used his magic to benefit its people, the king, and his court. Landro was relatively high level, possibly the most powerful wizard at Koralgesh. During the festival of the summer solstice, Landro's treachery was revealed. While the city was in the midst of revelry, he went to the gatehouse, killed the guards, and lowered the chain that protected the city. The pirates attacked with the help of clerics of Tram and a host of monsters. The town was taken by surprise, and its fate was sealed. Landro might have been the leader of the attack, but he perished in the battle as well, strangled by the enraged high priest of Kor's bare hands. It's not hard to work Koralgesh into your campaign. The city was centrally located between several Savage Coast powers. It's directly south of Renardi and not far from Dunwick. Again, demi-humans that lived in the doomed city could still be alive more than likely. And it did have a sizable dwarven population by all reports. While the ruins are covered by lava flow, you wouldn't have a difficult time convincing certain groups to try to dig out the city, not just for its buried riches, but because it's located at a prime spot for trade. If you have a player wanting to start their domain without going through the process of getting a reward from a king, they can always start spending some of that massive treasure hoard they've collected for the last 20 levels on rebuilding New Koralgesh. King Immortal might very well have some descendants looking for adventurers to help them reclaim their birthright by rebuilding the city. Koralgesh had a significant presence of magic users and clerics that supported it, from both the Temple of Kor and several wizards in the king's service. They even had a magic relic of minor power that could predict the weather for a ship leaving port. The city's wealth makes for a strange continuity problem, as the adventurer insists the city is forgotten less than 100 years after its destruction. Getting introduced to someone descended from one of the citizens of Koralgesh is a central plot point to start the game. A city of that size might be buried in lava in an afternoon, but people will remember it. Survivors of the disaster will settle in new towns and often form conclaves in their new homes until their culture is finally absorbed into their new land. The adventure did promise 2 new monsters, and it does deliver. I don't think either of these monsters were reprinted anywhere else in all the years since Dungeon published the adventure. Certainly not in any of the creature catalogs. I might be one of the few people that even remember them, and I just learned about them when I picked up the magazine. First up is the Tyrannobus. This semi-aquatic predator is equal parts froghemoth, odiug, and scorpion from Mortal Kombat. It's got 4 eye stalks that poke out of the water, a circular row of teeth, lots of tentacles, and an elongated barb that can spit out and reel in victims. The teeth start sawing into any armor the victim is wearing, and once it cracks you open like a can of Spam, then the real fun starts. It's neutral hungry, it regenerates slowly, and it's a good-sized boss monster for low-level adventurers. Also appearing only in this module is the Epidrazzle, or the painting monkey. I don't know what Epidrazzle means, but it's a massive simian with scaly skin and overly long arms. The creature is summoned from an unknown plane of existence with only 2 dimensions. A wizard creates a magical painting, binds an Epidrazzle, and leaves it to guard a room. When you enter, the creature reaches out of the painting and tries to drag victims into the painting, where they become entrapped until they're freed. The Epidrazzle can't leave the frame. It doesn't even have to appear in the original artwork. It just appears and starts grabbing people nearby. Its attacks cause a save versus paralysis, and the paralyzed people are dragged back into the painting next round. You can attack the frame. It's not hard to destroy. Of course, you can't destroy the painting while the Epidrazzle is attacking. If the painting is destroyed, all the trapped victims are freed, and the monster itself is released back to its home plane. That's everything about Koralgesh I could find. if you want to get a copy of Dungeon Magazine number 2, you're in luck, because Paizo made all the Dungeon magazines free online. 2 weeks after I paid for the entire PDF catalog. Lucky me. It's a fun adventure, few people know about it. If you're running a low-level campaign, there's no reason not to grab it. Next, I'm going to do another conversion with Dragons of Stormwreck Island, the latest starter set from WotC, where you get to run around some islands until you hit level 3. Is it any good? Can we make it Mystaran? Let's find out, because I still have it in shrink wrap. But until then, watch out for Volcano Day.